Day, my dear Rocky. It's such an honor to be here. Thanks, everyone. Thank you from your time to reimagine DEI. I want to start today by sharing two pivotal moments in my professional journey that reshaped my understanding of leadership and accountability. In the early stages of my career, I joined a small consulting firm specializing in customized assessment processes. This was more than just a job to me. It was where I fell in love with skills and assessments and the science of asking insightful questions. It was there when I laid the foundation of my professional identity. 5 years in, I decided it's time for me to move forward. My CEO convinced me to stay and take her position. I thought about it, but I decided to decline. Then, one of the company's advisors told me that I'm not cracked up to be a leader. Since I really appreciated that person, that stuck with me and I believed it. Fast forward to less than 1 year later, and I find myself as the co founder of an HR tech company. I was offered to be the co CEO, but I declined. I believed it wasn't for me. My new co founder was also harsh with his feedback. When I tried to explain how by creating better assessments we would produce higher correlations with on the job performance, he replied, I don't care about correlations. Prove to me that better assessments results in more money for our clients. That's what they care about. While the first feedback I received really got me down and crippled me, the second feedback was invigorating. He got me thinking about how do I quantify better prediction in terms of ROI. It sent me on a search for formulas, metrics, and real world measures that once we showed it to potential clients, they were sold. So why am I telling you this? This session is about accountability. And I'm here to tell you that accountability starts with measurement. It's powered by feedback and it's scaled by recognizable wins. So let's break it down, shall we? Accountability, by definition, is the obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's actions. Now, some of us are more accountable by nature and than others, but all of us basically need some encouragement and help. And there are multiple ways to create accountability or to encourage people to become more accountable. So you can see here there is a multitude of factors, but I do want to focus today on key two. One is clear expectations and goals, and the second one is regular feedback and communication. Let's start with clear expectations and goals. Think about your business environment. Think about departments like sales, like marketing, like finance. How do goals are being set and how those goals are being set and measured in those areas? So within the business area, we have a multitude of um, different ways to or models to measure business results, like KPIs, OKRs, SMART goals, etc., etc. We're measuring business goals both individually and at the team level. And what happens when it comes to DEI? Are we measuring with the same meticulousness? Are we measuring both at the individual goal, at the individual level and at the team level? And with all of the resources being invested in the past years in DEI, are we able to make a measurable impact, a measurable difference? The research answer to this is unfortunately not. What you're seeing here is data from a recent study that basically compiled data from 50 years worth of studies being done and calculating a measure called the discrimination ratio. The discrimination ratio basically looks at the number of callbacks a diverse candidate versus a non-diverse candidate gets in the hiring process. So every circle that you see here is a study conducted in a specific year. And for example, a 3.5 discrimination ratio means that a white candidate will get 3.5 callbacks for one callback that an African Black candidate will receive. But zooming out for a second, you can see the trend line. You can see that in 50 years, the trend has remained stable, meaning no significant difference. Also, when you look at it by country, in most countries, it remained without change, and in some countries there was even a slight increase. So why is that? Collective accountability just doesn't cut it. The same way that we're meticulously measuring business results, both at the individual and at the team level, we should also be measuring DEI results. And our DEI metrics has to be very thoughtful and accurate. So what do I mean? For example, let's take an example from the hiring domain. We don't want to just measure the number of ethnically diverse candidates that we've hired. We want to look at the applied versus hired ratio. So for example, if we had 20% of our candidate pipeline that are diverse candidates, but out of the candidates that we've hired, we only have 5% of diverse candidates, then we know that diverse candidates are leaking through the bias cracks in our hiring process. And that's what I mean when I say thoughtful measurement and not just measuring. Now, let's say we have done the first stage. We're measuring, we're holding our leaders accountable. We don't want just to hold them accountable. We also want them to improve on their DEI goals and metrics. So how do we move from accountability to growth? I'm not saying anything new to you when I'm telling you that feedback is such a critical component of growth and improvement. And not just any feedback. The feedback needs to be actionable, constructive, and timely in order to make people act on it. Now, think about all of those areas where your leaders are required to make decisions that impact DEI: hiring, training, firing, promoting. Are they receiving any feedback about their decision-making practices, their decision-making results? Is there a connection between the two? For example, if your leaders has some type of a bias that is creeping in to their decision-making, are they being aware of that bias? If they're being aware and they're taking corrective action, are they being aware of the results? Do they know if they were able to rectify, if they were able to improve? In the vast majority of cases, the answer to all of these questions is unfortunately no. Now, imagine a basketball player shooting a hoop and then being blindfolded and never knowing if they made the dunk. Feedback is so important. So, what can we do? What I recommend is measuring decision-making processes and not just the results. So once you measure your process and not just your results, you're able to reverse engineer the process to provide insight about what might be creating the bias. So for example, when you're measuring the process via scorecards, for example, you're able to provide your leaders with feedback like you're promoting more male than female employees, although you have 50-50 in your team. And that might be because you tend to perceive men as more available or resilient or persistent. Now, let's say we're measuring, we're holding accountable, and we're having them improve by feedback. Now we want to scale this from our senior leadership or our leadership to the entire organization. How do we do that? How do we move from growth to scale? moving from growth to scale requires both an infrastructure for measurement, for feedback, for communication, but it also requires advocacy. So, how do you turn your leaders into advocates? In the different amazing talks that were here, we've heard about different things that companies are doing. Amazing Jackie shared very actionable advice on how to go about it. My 2 cents is that in order to inspire advocacy or to encourage advocacy, your leaders need to believe in DEI, believe it's important, believe it's worthwhile, and feel capable of achieving it, and also feel capable of making others achieve it. So let's also break this down. How do we make our leaders believe in it, believe that it's important? Okay, so different people have different motivations or understandings of DEI. Not everyone has an inherent understanding of why it's important. But if it's tied to business results, it's much easier to comprehend. So it might be that at the offset, you don't have your internal data to prove the business case of investing in DEI, but there is plenty of knowledge and research out there to demonstrate the clear connection between improved DEI results and improved business results. Now, since all of us have biases, you can also leverage those biases to get buy-in. What do I mean? One of the most prevalent biases we all have as human is loss aversion. We are more motivated by not losing something than earning something. So when you take these results and when you communicate them, think about how to communicate what we're actually losing by not investing more in DEI rather than what could we be gaining. So it's the same numbers, it's the same data, but it's the way that you frame it that can make your leaders better understand the importance. So let's say that now they understand the importance. How do you make them feel capable of actually achieving it? So, in order to make them feel capable, you need to celebrate their wins throughout the way. So if they've adopted structured interviews or overcame some kind of a bias or promoted more qualified and diverse employees, the more you'll measure, the easier for it will be for you to recognize this and celebrate it. So to conclude, hard truth should not be avoided. Leaders today are not being sufficiently held accountable for DEI. Telling leaders to get better without showing them how is basically the same way that I was told I'm not leadership material without telling me why or how can I improve. It only left me feeling paralyzed and incapable. To spur accountability and advocacy, you should be more like my co-founder. Don't just tell it like it is, but also show people how to get better and recognize them when they do. That's how you turn them into advocates. Thank you for listening. And if you want to learn more about monitoring and reducing bias in your hiring with data and feedback, then just feel free to reach out to me via email or LinkedIn. I'll drop them both on the chat. Thank you.